I never thought that my wedding day would be the moment when my world broke into countless pieces that could never be fixed. I am James Donovan, and I recall every detail of that day as if it were carved into my skin. I was full of hope and excitement, believing in a forever promise that was shattered in the most shocking way. Eliana and I had been planning our wedding for what seemed like forever. Each choice, whether it was the little details of the flower setup or the big plan for our first dance, was made with love. We met in college, where time and luck joined our hearts. I fell deeply for her because of the way she laughed, the warmth in her eyes, and the silent connection we shared in busy lecture halls. I truly believed that our love was unbreakable. I was convinced that nothing could ever separate us. But on that fateful day, I faced a betrayal so deep that I began to doubt every memory, every secret promise, and every touch that once brought me joy. The morning that changed everything. The day began just like any other wedding morning. I woke up in our shared apartment with my heart beating fast from both excitement and nerves. I took a quiet moment to myself, sipping coffee as the sun slowly spread soft colors across the sky. I silently practiced my vows in my mind, trying to calm my racing heart. Eliana was running behind schedule, a fact I blamed on her careful nature, always making sure every detail was just right. I waited calmly in the dressing room of our small yet charming venue, surrounded by the lively chatter of the wedding party getting ready for the ceremony. My best friend, Daniel, noticed my anxious energy and gave me a reassuring pat on the back. "You're going to be amazing today, Michael. You deserve all the happiness in the world," he said, smiling in a way that should have made me feel better. Yet, there was a hint of uncertainty, a small voice suggesting that something was off. I brushed it aside, thinking it was just normal pre-wedding jitters. Then, the phone rang. I remember that ring echoing in the quiet room, a call that would soon tear apart the life I knew. It was Eliana's maid of honor, Saranal, speaking with a shaky voice. "Michael, there's something you need to know, please come to the reception hall right away." My mind raced as I hurried down the hall, each step heavy with dread. I couldn't understand what could be so urgent and damning on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The confrontation. When I entered the reception hall, I saw a stir near the entrance. Guests were murmuring quietly, and a heavy feeling of foreboding filled the air. Right in the middle stood Eliana, her eyes wide with shock and sadness, and beside her, a stranger, tall, good-looking, and clearly out of place among the joyful crowd, standing close to her. I would later learn his name was Vincent, and his calm presence made the situation even harder to bear. I recall that time seemed to drag on. Every heartbeat pounded in my ears, and I struggled to breathe. "Eliana, what's happening?" I managed to ask in a trembling voice. Those words felt odd, like I was watching someone else go through my nightmare. Eliana's eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain, her voice quivering. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I made a terrible mistake." The word "mistake" hurt deeply, echoing the pain of a betrayal so severe that even our sweetest memories were now shadowed by her deceit. I saw confusion and disorder in her eyes, a mix of guilt, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite figure out. At that moment, the harsh truth hit me: the woman I loved so much had cheated on me on our wedding day. The shock, the disbelief, and the intense pain swirled inside me, leaving me numb and lost. The aftermath of betrayal. In the hours that followed, I swung between disbelief and a deep, crushing despair. I left the reception hall before anyone could speak another word. I drove without direction through the city streets, my mind flooded with memories and unanswered questions. The familiar sights of our town, the park where we shared our first kiss, the cafe where we spent lazy afternoons dreaming of our future, suddenly felt like cruel reminders of a once pure and unbreakable love. I sought shelter in a small diner on the edge of town, sitting alone in a booth as I tried to piece together the shards of my broken heart. While sipping cups of coffee that went cold before I finished them, I replayed every moment of my life with Eliana, desperately trying to find the moment when everything went wrong. How could a love so deep be turned to ashes by a single act of betrayal? The pain was too much, and the loneliness was overwhelming. For days after the wedding, that moment haunted me. I went back to the reception hall, the very place where my dreams had fallen apart, and I could almost hear Eliana's apologies echoing around me. I stayed away from places that reminded me of what once was. Daniel and our mutual friends tried to comfort me, offering kind words and urging me to move forward. But the wound was still too fresh, and the betrayal too deep. I felt as if I were drowning in a sea of regret and sorrow, unable to see any light beyond the darkness. The search for answers. In the following weeks, I began a journey of self-reflection, trying to understand how and why Eliana had been unfaithful. I wanted to believe that there was an explanation, a mix-up or a lapse in judgment that could be forgiven. I reached out to Serenal, the one who had made that fateful phone call, hoping she could help me understand. It wasn't planned, she said quietly, her eyes lowered. Eliana, she said she felt trapped, that she wasn't happy, and that Vincent was the one who made her feel alive. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but she was crying when she told me. Serenal's words only deepened my confusion. I had always seen Eliana as someone who treasured our life together. How could she feel so lost that she would turn to another man on our wedding day? My thoughts kept returning to the idea that maybe I had done something wrong, that my own faults had driven her to look for comfort elsewhere. I questioned every decision I had made, every moment I had taken for granted. The self-doubt was overwhelming, and I struggled with the idea that even the strongest love could be so fragile. I started to wonder if I had ever truly known her, if our whole relationship was built on illusions and unspoken beliefs. A journey through the dark. As the initial shock began to fade, a time of numb self-reflection set in. I withdrew from everyone, seeking comfort in solitude as I tried to understand the depth of my own sorrow. I began writing in a journal, putting my thoughts and feelings on paper. It turned into a healing process, a way to face the raw, honest truth of my life without any pretenses. I wrote about the wedding day, the betrayal that had become my unwanted companion, and the heavy burden of loneliness. During this time, I started to consider that maybe my life could go on after the betrayal. I began meeting with a therapist, a kind and perceptive woman named Rachel, who showed me that healing is not a straight line. Grief and betrayal can seem all-consuming, she told me in one session, but every day brings a small step forward, even if it doesn't feel like much. Her words struck a chord with me, even as the memory of that day continued to hurt deeply. Gradually, I started going out into the world again. I took long walks in the park, sat by the river, and tried to enjoy life in ways that didn't center on my lost love. I learned to enjoy the little things, a cool breeze on a hot day, the sound of children playing, and the taste of my favorite coffee. Yet even while finding comfort in these simple moments, the question of why Eliana chose that moment to betray me still loomed large. Why on our wedding day? What drove her to make such a heartbreaking choice? Uncovering hidden truths. Determined to learn the truth, I confronted Eliana one evening when we met face-to-face at a mutual friend's event. The conversation was tense and awkward, filled with long pauses and cautious looks. Eliana, I started softly, why did you do it? Why today? Her eyes, filled with unshed tears, met mine briefly before looking away quickly. I never meant for things to turn out like this, she murmured. It's something I've struggled with for a long time, but I never wanted to hurt you. Her words left me with even more questions than answers. In the following months, I began to piece together bits of our past, snippets of conversations, fleeting moments of doubt, and subtle clues that I had missed before. It turned out that Eliana had been battling her own inner demons for years, feelings of not being good enough, a deep fear of commitment, and a strong need for approval that I had somehow overlooked. It was as if our love had been a fragile tapestry slowly coming apart from the inside, and I had been too caught up in trust and love to notice the loose threads. I learned that Eliana had once shared her inner struggles with a friend, expressing doubts about whether she was truly meant to be with me. That revelation was a painful reminder that love, in its most complicated form, is rarely simple. I was forced to face not only her betrayal but also the possibility that I might have played a part in letting our relationship grow stagnant. It was a hard truth to accept, that in our quest for perfection, we both lost sight of who we really were as individuals. Embracing the pain and rebuilding. It didn't take long for me to understand that healing required more than just knowing the reasons behind Eliana's unfaithfulness. I needed to rebuild my own identity, separate from the person I was when I only thought about us. I began to focus on my own interests, writing, music, and old dreams that I had set aside for our future together. I joined a local writers group, and for the first time in months, I found comfort in the creative process. Words became my safe haven, a way to turn the pain of betrayal into something that could one day help others who were struggling. I started to document my journey by writing long letters that I never sent, recording every tear, every sleepless night, and every small victory along the way. In those pages, I discovered a strength I never knew I had. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I thought I had made and to accept that some questions might never have answers. There was a surprising freedom in this process, the freedom to let go of the past and to welcome the uncertainty of what was to come. Daniel, who stayed by my side throughout my ordeal, often reminded me that time is the best healer. "You can't force your heart to heal," he said one evening as we sat on the porch of my apartment, "but every day you wake up, you grow a little stronger." His words gently reminded me that healing is a journey, one that has its ups and downs, with small wins along the way. A glimpse of renewal. As the seasons shifted, so did the shape of my soul. The raw, painful edges of betrayal slowly began to soften, replaced by a cautious hope for renewal. I met new people, picked up hobbies I had long forgotten, and slowly started to build a life that was truly my own. I began volunteering at a local community center, where I found purpose in helping others overcome their struggles. It was a small step, but it marked the start of a change that eventually led me back to happiness. One cool autumn evening, as I was closing the center after a long day, I met someone who would change my life in ways I never expected. Her name was Catherine, an artist with a free, creative spirit and a kind heart that connected with mine. Catherine had her own tale of heartache and loss, and in our talks, I found someone who truly understood me. We discussed art, the beauty hidden in our scars, and the strength needed to keep moving forward even when life feels like it's falling apart. Catherine's view on life was both refreshing and grounding. "Sometimes," she said while we sat by a small bonfire outside the center, "our pain is what shapes us into who we are meant to be. It's not about forgetting the hurt, but about learning to live with it and still see the beauty in the chaos." Her words, soft yet strong, gave me the courage to face my own darkness without fear. I began to realize that while Eliana's betrayal had left deep scars, it also forced me to confront parts of myself that I had long ignored. The long road to forgiveness. Forgiveness turned out to be a word with much more weight than I had ever imagined. It wasn't about excusing the betrayal or erasing the memory of that painful day, it was about taking back my own power and refusing to let someone else define me. Over time, I came to understand that forgiveness isn't a final goal, but a journey that continues each day. I worked through my emotions in therapy sessions with Rachel, and slowly, I began to forgive not only Eliana but also myself for letting my happiness be so easily broken. There were still moments when the memories would rush back, of Eliana's tear-streaked face, of the cold silence that followed her confession, of the empty reception hall that once promised a future full of love. In those moments, I would retreat into my writing, letting the words flow as a way to clear away the lingering hurt of that betrayal. I learned to honor my pain without letting it take over me, and in doing so, I discovered that even the deepest wounds can heal with time and kindness. A new chapter begins. Now, when I look back at that day, when my wedding was stained by betrayal, I don't see it as the end of my journey, but as a painful yet life-changing chapter. I have learned that the human heart is surprisingly strong. Life is like a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, and every experience, no matter how painful, helps shape who we become. Eliana and I eventually went our separate ways. Our parting was bittersweet, a shared understanding that our paths were no longer the same. In the quiet that followed, I learned to welcome solitude and rediscover who I really am. I started taking long, lonely walks through the city, letting the soft hum of everyday life surround me. Each step reminded me that I was still moving forward, even if the direction was unclear. Catherine remained a constant presence in my life, and our friendship slowly grew into something deeper, a bond built not on the ruins of my past but on a hopeful view of the future. With her by my side, I felt the stirrings of a genuine and healing love. We spent countless evenings talking about our dreams, ambitions, and the many ways art and life come together. She taught me that being vulnerable isn't a weakness but a strength, a lesson I only learned after my illusions were shattered. Reflections on a day of broken promises. Today, I find myself at a crossroads between my past and my future. The memory of that wedding day, with all its pain and betrayal, still lives within me, a scar that reminds me how far I've come. It shows me that even in our darkest times, there is always a chance for rebirth. Eliana's betrayal was a harsh and unexpected blow, but it forced me to rethink the true meaning of love and the value of self-worth. I have learned that real love begins with loving oneself and that sometimes, the end of one chapter starts another. I still wonder about the choices we make and the unexpected outcomes they bring. I question how one single moment can change the entire course of life. Yet, through that questioning, I have gained a deeper understanding of myself, a realization that life, with all its flaws, is a journey worth taking. I now accept the mix of my emotions and understand that every tear, every moment of despair, has led me to a place of new strength. By sharing my story, I am not looking for pity or comfort, but a feeling of freedom. I hope that by opening up about my experiences, others who have suffered similar heartbreak might find the courage to heal. We all share the human experience of pain and loss, and it is through that shared bond that we find our way back to hope. Moving forward with cautious optimism. The road ahead is still uncertain, but I am no longer held back by the ghosts of yesterday. I have learned that forgiveness is something I practice every day, a choice I make each time I step out into the world and trust life once more. I continue to write, create, and nurture the relationships that brighten my life. Every day reminds me that the human heart can feel both deep sorrow and immense joy, and that healing proves our strength. As I write these words, I realize that my journey is far from complete. I am still learning, still changing, and still finding the delicate balance between holding on and letting go. The memory of that fateful wedding day will always be part of me, but it no longer defines who I am. Instead, it acts as a spark for change, a reminder that even in the face of the deepest betrayal, a new beginning is possible. I am James Donovan, a man who has experienced love and loss, betrayal and recovery. My story is one of broken promises and revived dreams. It is a tale of resilience and the strong will to rebuild, even when everything seems to fall apart under the weight of despair. I have come to see that every ending is simply the start of a new chapter, and that within the ruins of the past lies the promise of a brighter future. In the quiet moments when I sit by the window and watch the world go by, I smile knowing that I am still here, still able to love, still able to feel joy, and still able to hope. I carry with me the lessons learned from a day that was meant to celebrate love but instead revealed its fragility. And in that revelation, I found the strength to rebuild not only my life but the very core of who I am. This is my story, a journey of pain and persistence, of love lost and love found again. It stands as proof that even when betrayal strikes at our weakest moment, the human spirit can rise from the ruins and carve a new path toward healing and happiness.